Welcome to the Union Federation here on the Fandom Podcast Network, where we discuss both Star Trek and the Orville. And we are discussing the Orville New Horizons, Season 3, Episode 8, Midnight Blue. And just a warning, spoilers are ahead. My name is Kevin, and I'll be your captain for this episode. I'd like to introduce my crew of the Union Federation Starship. With me, as always, my brother and fellow co-founder of the Fandom Podcast Network. Please welcome Kyle Wagner.
Yeah, it's great to be here on another episode of the Union Federation. Kevin, I do have an appointment with Dolly Parton later on, so can we just make sure we stay on tight here? Yeah, you don't keep Dolly waiting.
I know she's demanding, and she deserves all the respect that she can get, but you're going to sit here first, and you're going to do this podcast. I'm sorry. It's going to happen.
She only works 9 to 5, Kevin. Come on now.
She will understand. All right, and joining us again is our science expert, our secret black site research officer. I'd like to welcome Haley Stoddard.
Hello. I have mapped everything out. I know where everything is, and if you think I don't know where it is, I do know where it is.
That's why we have you on board. Yes. And in case you guys are wondering why Amy hasn't joined us for a while, our counselor, is because she's lost in Scotland. Well, not necessarily lost, but I think she might end up staying there. She's enjoying a nice vacation, visiting friends of the Trek universe there in Scotland, and having a wonderful time. And I know exactly how she's doing and how she's feeling, because I love that country myself. Kyle.
I actually had a question for Haley, because I got a bill in our Fandom Podcast Network mailbox the other day for limited edition krill interrogation equipment.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
She's doing her job, Kyle.
I'm scared. I'm legitimately scared.
Guys, we have a lot to get into this episode. As I mentioned, spoiler warning ahead, but let's get into the quantum drive. All right, guys, this is Orville New Horizons, Season 3, Episode 8, Midnight Blue. This one aired on July 21st, 2022, and we have our Captain's Log episode synopsis. Haley, take it away.
Topa accompanies Kelly and Bortus on an inspection of the female Moclan colony. Havina tells Topa that she has resumed smuggling female children from Moklis in violation of the agreement with the Moclan government, and recruits Topa to her cause, entrusting her the name of a contact. After Topa is kidnapped by a Moclan inspection team, Havina tells Ed that she had recruited Topa and suspects that the Moclans had uncovered her involvement. Ed tells her that in order to establish probable cause for the kidnapping and launch an investigation into the Moclans to find where Topa is being held, Havina must testify before the Union Council that she had been violating the agreement. Fearful of what might happen to the colony, Havina initially refuses but changes her mind after an encounter with the simulation of her idol, Dolly Parton. Meanwhile, Kelly and Bortus track down and rescue Topa from a secret Moclan outpost, where Bortus brutally beats and blinds Topa's captor after learning that she was tortured for the contact's name. The three travel to the Union Council, convincing the members to investigate the Moclans of their secret activities and treatment of female Moclans. The Council ultimately votes to expel Moklis from the Union and also provide protection for the colony. Clyden returns to the Orville and apologizes to Topa, accepting her as his daughter.
Ooh, all right, guys. I'm going to try to keep my emotions, but just going to warn everyone, I might be breaking some tears, to be perfectly honest and upfront. First reactions to this episode, Kyle.
Very powerful, very emotional. I love the fact that they went to the sanctuary. I think this is a great follow-up with Topa's story. And I think I'm glad we got the chance to see this in this season, because otherwise, who knows when we might have gotten to see it. It's very frustrating in one aspect and to watch this, because we're watching some major development in characters and storylines and things that I want to see continue on, and to have this feeling of unknown hanging over us. I mean, to see the growth in Bortus, and how much Bortus has evolved from even just earlier season 2, much less the first season, to where he is now, and just seeing how much in this, and this is a whole for the season, how much they've expanded this world, and really this season giving you a full emotional investment in this world. And I think, again, this just continues the run of about the last 3 or 4 Orville episodes. It's like, you gotta better have that box of tissue ready, because you never know when you might need it.
Amen, brother. Haley, your thoughts, first reaction.
So I watched this morning because I did not get to it anytime this week. And I have to say, this is probably my favorite episode of the season so far. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is my favorite episode after this season is done.
I'm surprised I didn't get a message from you, because if I had watched it this morning like you did for the first time, I'd be going, guys, I might be late to this podcast.
Yeah.
That's a bold.
There's a pile of tissues right here. While I was sitting here watching, because I'm allergies, and also
that's what it is. Allergies.
Allergies. No, I mean, I'll totally admit I was crying. As a parent, Kevin, you get this, and what you wouldn't do for your kid, and I know we'll get into it, but there was that, and being a sister of someone who is in the LGBT community, and that acceptance, and knowing others who struggle with this. And I've worked with clients whose parents don't accept them for who they are. It was extremely emotional. I will fully admit that it wasn't just allergies, even though it is partly allergies for me. And so this was a incredibly well done story. And even though it wasn't completely wrapped up by the end, there was enough wrapped up by the end that it was just beautiful.
Well said. Yeah, you guys have all said it very, very well, and I'm with you there. It's as for being one of the best episodes, I could be right with you there, Haley. We'll see what happens, but my God, I just kind of saving it all for the rest of this podcast here. But this episode hit me in the feels. And I know I'm not alone. I put a post on social media out there, and a lot of people feel the same. And the push to renew the Orville wave is getting bigger and bigger. No word on whether or not that's going to happen yet, whether it's not or it will. Fingers crossed, but I'm not expecting it to. But, still, I'm going to put that out there. Kyle?
I just want to throw this out there because it's been a lot of talk on social media over the last couple of days. San Diego Comic-Con is going on right now. Hulu is at San Diego Comic-Con, and they have a huge Orville presence with them at San Diego Comic-Con. They're playing it on big screens at San Diego Comic-Con at their booth. It's getting a lot of love. So, I think as much social media talk as the Orville has gotten this season and people recognizing it, I think I actually have more hope now that we could get something announced, whether it's a season 4 or maybe a couple Orville films or something like that, compared to where I was feeling like at the beginning of the season, we were definitely looking at the last season and maybe nothing ever of the Orville again. I think the momentum is growing. I don't know about another season, but I could easily see who's talking Seth into, hey, let's throw some Orville movies out there or something like that, now that we know Hulu's getting in more into their own movies. For instance, they have Predator Prey coming out August 5th, which is a Hulu produced film.
The one complaint that we've had, Kyle, over the years talking about Orville is the lack of promotion for it. And, and the lack of merchandise for it as well. Not the type of merchandise that I'm used to with other properties, not the type of, buzz that I wish it would get, but who knows? We will see. All right, guys. I always like to have the, as I call it, Kevin fun check here. Some fun moments here in the show I do want to touch on before we get into our opening topic comments and suggestions here. Dan sighting. Mike Henry comes back is Dan. And we had a moment there in engineering where it gets a little awkward when Topa is basically asking Malloy out on a date. And Malloy doesn't quite get it, but everyone else in the room does, including Dan and all the engineering crew there, which I thought was very funny. And then finally, when it sinks into Malloy there, everyone sees his face, including Lamar. And Lamar goes, "There you go, Sherlock."
That was a great line. That was a great line.
And I like the fact that Malloy kind of says, "Look, you're like a sister to me," and lets her down easy, and then she goes, and then Dan says, she just recognizes that you're a handsome man. You're very handsome. That was funny. And then like Yaphet's like, he looks better going than coming. Any thoughts on that scene, anyone?
That was a very fun scene.
Yeah. No, it was great.
I like the fact that I don't know. The moment was serious, but I like seeing other Yaphet type aliens in that meeting at the end with the delegates and stuff like that. I was like, "Yay, Yaphet friends and family!" I thought that was really cool. And we'll dive into this a little bit more, but we got to mention another fun thing: Dolly freaking Parton. Not only is a song that she sings highlighted in this, more than one, of course. 9 to 5, the original, does make a cameo in this, but she herself, the legend herself, makes a comment. First reactions when that came out, Kyle?
That was, to get her on, and I know we'll get into it later, but we know when this was filmed and with everything that was going on, and as great as Dolly looks, we have to remember she's of a certain age, so COVID was a much higher risk for her than not. But just to have that moment after establishing what they did in season 2, and for her to agree to that, it was just absolutely wonderful.
Haley.
Yeah, no, I thought that was wonderful when when Havina walks into the simulator. I'm like, oh, I think I know who's going to come in that door. And I avoid spoilers, so I hadn't seen anything, but I was like, I have a feeling, I have a hunch. Yeah, so that was awesome. Also, I have to say, I don't know if you guys caught it, but my music ear did. When they were dancing at dinner, they were dancing to Jolene.
Yes, at the sanctuary for the Moclan women. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was like, that's Jolene.
That came up in trivia. Yeah, that's great. All right, guys, I got a couple of opening topic discussions before we get, of course, to the rest of the show that I do want to hit on here. Gordon says to the Moclan delegation basically what we've all been thinking. And he goes, quote, "Look, I know I'm not supposed to talk here, and I'm probably going to get court-martialed, but somebody's got to call out these assholes. Every time they cross a line, we let it go because we're scared to fight the Kalon without them. And every time we compromise, they still act like they're the ones getting the shaft." And then he directs his comment towards the Moculans. "You treat people like garbage. And then and when you get called on it, you bitch and moan that we're not respecting your beliefs. Well, screw your," and then he gets called out by Mercer. Guys, your thoughts on that scene? Malloy's had a couple of great moments, a lot of great moments, especially in a recent episode. He's lovable, he's goofy, but this was a scene we were all thinking about this all time, and he kind of says what we're thinking. What did you think, Haley?
I immediately was like, he's right though. Like, I get it. Like he's like, I'm probably gonna get court-martialed for this, but someone's got to say something. And I was like, hell yes, somebody has to say something. I mean, I would have been that person if that had been me. I'd be like, no, this is crap. So yeah, I immediately was like, he's right though.
Kyle, your thoughts on that scene?
Oh, it was a great scene. I mean, it was calling it just like we see it, and I think it's actually a very good commentary on what's kind of going on in today's world too, where it's just like there's almost this thing where we don't speak up about things because we're so worried about how it's going to affect us. And Gordon just said, "Screw it! If I get court-martialed, I get court-martialed. I'm gonna say what I'm gonna say." And I mean, I think that in a way is even kind of reflective of what cancel culture is today. People are starting not to speak up because of cancel culture, and Gordon taking the risk of being court-martialed is somebody else making the same thing and taking the risk of being cancel cultured. So I think it was a very reflective thing upon what's going on right now, and Seth has done a phenomenal job of having those overtures, but very intelligently done within the episodes.
Well said, especially the cancel culture observation there, Kyle. And that's a that is a real new fear now, unfortunately. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. In the back of my mind after that scene, though, I just wish there would have been like a look from Admiral Izawa or Halsey going like, like, yeah, we're supposed to not like that, but we like that, and it just would like, someone could like talk to Mercer going, is he going to be court-martialed or punished? And then he's like, yeah, I'll take care of it. And then later he's like, Gordon, I got to do something here. Why don't you like do a concert for us or something?
It was all off camera. As
I
always like to say, I'm like, it's there. It's just not, we just didn't see it. It happened.
Because, as characters, the admirals were like, you go, leave it to Mercer to stop you.
Well, I mean, it's based on military, so yes, there would be a dressing down, but I mean, we'd be seeing dressing downs left and right if they were always in the script and on screen, and so you just have to picture in your mind that it happened. It just didn't happen on screen.
Yep. All right, guys. The other opening discussion I wanted to talk about, which was brought up in our Friends at Den of Geek article this week, again by Michael Wynn Johnson. We're going to be touching on that a little bit. Is the moment between Bortus and Kelly. And Michael goes on to say, however, not everything is entirely believable. There's somewhat incongruous subplot where it seems the writers are trying to introduce a romantic bond between Bortus and Grayson. At first, it is merely a younger female Moclan innocently asking if they are mates during dinner, but later the hints towards romance become more obvious. During the rescue mission, Grayson is injured, and as Bortus patches her up as best he can, the two exchange a longing look. Bortus admits Kelly is part of their family because of what she does for Topa, but it is truly seemed to go beyond that. At this point, it is all theory what that look truly meant. Fans will undoubtedly be chewing on that for some time, especially considering the conclusion of the episode where a resourceful Clyden, played by Chad L. Coleman, returns to the Orville and his family and apologizes for the truly awful things that he said to his daughter when he stormed out a few episodes ago. The writers must tread carefully with this romance, and not simply because it would mean that Bortus would seemingly awaken a new part of his sexuality, but because so far one of the proposed romantic relationships this season simply did not work. That all too brief, quite unbelievable romantic entanglement between Lamar and Kiali was way too rushed and felt forced. And if they were going to develop anything between Bortus and Kelly, we would hope it's more organic and well developed. I thought there's a couple of things that I agree mostly, and there's a couple of things I disagree with this article. I don't know if I felt like the Kiali and Lamar thing was forced. I thought it was a neat thing to try, and then it's nice to kind of try it, and then if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But when I went back and watched that scene again between Bortus and Kelly while she's being healed, he was being the most sincere in one of the most, I think, special moments between two characters in a long time when it comes to Bortus kind of opening up himself to the rest of the crew here, because, he's always been that kind of like weird, stoic guy. But with his friendships with the rest of the crew, we're slowly kind of starting to see that do this. And it is an interesting idea that, he would be attracted to a female. And this was, of course, introduced last season with that other Moclan and Kiali. And so I kind of found that interesting as well. But I wanted to ask you guys, did you like that moment? And did you think, what if this relationship was explored? Lily, what do you think?
So I kind of thought that a little bit, and then reflecting on it a little bit more, I think there's a couple of things going on with this moment. They are both heightened emotionally because they both have this great care and love for Topa, right? So given the circumstances of what they're doing and why they're on that planet, and what has clearly been transpiring off screen since Clyden left. I think that it's stemming from this place of not like a romantic relationship, but more of a mutual love and respect, because Kelly cares so much for Topa and has done so much for Topa that we got an entire episode about it. And even he kind of stepped in and was like, no, I gave her the code to access the file and stuff. And so I think it was more of a, I can see you as the mother and other parent that she should have always had, that she wasn't getting with Clyden.
Right.
And so I don't think it's necessarily like a romantic relationship, but it is that deep love that he shares with Kelly. And I think that's kind of where that moment came from, is kind of maybe giving us that recognition of like, he's finally going to open up to somebody besides Clyden and besides Topa to kind of have a love for, but not in a romantic sexual way.
That's a good, really good point, especially in that scene. Bortus does mention to Kelly, since Clyden has left, he's had, I'm paraphrasing, but there's been this void basically. And you touched on that. So that's great. Kyle, your thoughts, did you like it? Did you think it could be explored?
I think it's something they can explore. I think there's a few interesting points to take here. I kind of did get a little bit of vibe of this too, as a little Trek tribute of those early days of when Worf and Troy were kind of like, there's a little bit of feeling each other out kind of thing going on there.
Also too, like how Picard and Crusher never quite got there as well.
But to echo what Haley's talking about, this is kind of how I pulled this in, is a couple of things. First of all, Bortus is still kind of on the rebound. We don't know how much time has passed, but he lost basically. Mocklins are supposed to be mating for life, and it's supposed to be this very powerful thing when they split. So he's still dealing with the emotions that, while still trying to go against what his own upbringing was in being there for Topa and so he's kind of going through his own still bit of crisis of faith and conscience here. And here he has Kelly, who also has a great bond with Topa. Bortus respects that. They have a lot of emotions there. And I think those emotions kind of start tying together. And I think there's a little bit maybe of crossing the signals there a little bit, where maybe right now they're not realizing that their attraction, it might be more just because of their emotions, getting wrapped up in their emotions of the moment. And it was definitely one of those things where there was that unspoken silence, and the healing device goes off and kind of snaps them out of it. But if you go back, I rewatched the end of the episode, and the way Grayson acts when she walks in and sees Clyde in there, you can just tell there's some uncomfortableness, and it's not just because of her past with Clyde. And like, she feels like she's really intruding. Like, she kind of gives Bortus a little look, and so she's not quite sure what to make out of that. I don't know if it goes any further than this, considering our time frame and what's going on, but I think it's something that I wouldn't be surprised if at the next episode they even explore it a little bit more. But there was something there. It's just a matter of, is it just wires getting crossed, communication signals getting crossed because they're both so emotional in that moment, or is it going to be something that's going to play out more, because Bortus has been probably the most evolved character on the Orville since the show was started. And so I'm going to be curious to see how this plays out, how he plays out. It could go in a few different directions.
Yeah. With this episode being longer than any other ones, and I'll touch on that later, I'm kind of curious what they're going to be doing for the last two. So guys, well, for me personally, just real quick, I did find myself in the moment, and I wasn't surprised that it was interrupted by her arm being healed, bleep thing going off, that cool little ligament healer that was happening. But it was a nice moment to at least make you think about what if. So guys, if we can, and I always like to, does this episode have any connections to another episode? Well, all of these episodes have connections to other episodes, which has been one of the most brilliant things about this season here. I almost said final season there. We'll see. And that's what we have been mentioning a lot, that we love this connective tissue, and that they're bringing back old characters. They're not doing one and done stuff, yet the episodes are still episodic, which I love. Of course, this one ties back heavily, not to just all of the Mocklin moments we've had, but particular episode in season 2, episode 12, Sanctuary, which originally aired April 11th, 2019. And that's, of course, where we find out about the secret planet here that has this female contingencies of a female contingency group that escape Moklis to live in peace. And it's it was an interesting thing to bring in, because we were always wondering, like, well, what about the females that are born? What happens to them? And this is where all of them have becoming. Of course, this is being run by Havina, which we see in the third episode first, about a girl, because we find out that she's the one that's been writing all of these famous stories and poetry that the Mocklin males, assuming it was from a man, have been praising. So your thoughts on this connection to this episode, Sanctuary, Kyle?
I think the one thing with this season of the Orville is it has had a lot of time to past events, and I think there's reasons for that. I think Seth wanted to make sure he addressed some dangling plot lines in case he didn't get the chance after the season. In this case, you're not only connecting to Sanctuary, you're connecting to an episode from earlier in this season. So there's a lot of waves into that, and this episode, I think, ties in with so much of what we've seen from the Mocklin culture in both the male belief and what happened in Sanctuary. And I truly do believe what Seth has done is he's probably, in my opinion, made the Mocklins the most fleshed out and intriguing race of aliens we have in the Orville, because we've seen so many different sides to them. We've seen their own eternal conflicts. And I think he's using the Mocklins to reflect a lot of things that we've gone through within our own history and are still going through with now as well. And I think by doing that, he's made the Mocklins the most relatable. And as far as the ties, it's just, if the nice thing about it is it doesn't feel like it's a forced connection. It does feel like it's a free-flowing story, and just how the story is developing. We're not having an episode, oh, we need to get back to this. It's flowing it perfectly. And the characters are so well written and so well performed that you're just drawn into it. And whether you're looking at it from the female side or the male side, and just watching the performances are so incredibly well done by all the Mocklin actors. And you look at like the council, the members of the Mocklin delegation, the council, and how they stand so their feet firmly planted in the old ways. And then you see Bordis being the way he is. It's so beautifully written and so well integrated into each other.
Amy, Haley, what are your thoughts to the connection Sanctuary here? Because it almost feels like a part 2.
Kind of, sort of. And honestly, this is something that I have wanted a little bit more of, not a ton of, in Star Trek, is revisiting planets that we've been to, right? And seeing a planet that has grown from our interaction with them, right? Because TOS we see all the time. They go to a planet and Kirk does some stuff and he messes with society and their life as it is, as they know it, and then they just leave.
Excellent
no one ever goes
observation.
Back.
Excellent observation.
No one ever goes back to be like, hey, did we really F these people over on their planet, or did we help them?
That's a great point.
So this is something that I've kind of wanted, at least to a degree, in some capacity in Star Trek, of going back and seeing what's going on and revisiting a planet. And we get this with this episode where they have to go back to the Sanctuary planet, which makes sense because, they've got this agreement that no one's going to interfere, but they've got to monitor and make sure that everybody's doing their part. And it tells this wonderful story and really lends into what happens in this episode with the Mocklins. Basically, it's not ratified, as Halsey says, but they are being kicked out. They're done. The union, everybody involved in the union, who knows how many different races and planets are involved in this are sick and tired of it. Yes, they need the weapons, but also they're sick and tired of it. And you can kind of look at it as the Mocklins were holding the entire Union hostage. And I know we'll get more into it later, but in my thoughts now, they're holding the entire Union hostage and also holding them back, because what other planet, what other race, whatever could create weapons that would be powerful against the Kalon, but because the Mocklins are sitting there going like, well, we're the ones that do it and we're the only ones that can, na 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 na, they're holding people back, and that's also not okay. And you need to let people advance and all that stuff. So to tie back, I really appreciated that we got this call back, even though this episode was really very emotional given everything and being a parent, and I can only imagine what I would do in that situation. I liked that we again got to see a planet that we had visited before and see what's going on.
Love that comparison. That's great, and that's one of the things that we love about the Orville. Guys, I want to talk briefly about the cast that we have. We got some returning cast members as well. Directed by John Kazar, and of course written by Brandon Braga and Andre Bormanis. And I got some interesting trivia regarding John Kazar and Seth and how the production of this series is, because, well, I'm just going to tease a little bit later, because it's very interesting how COVID changed a lot, and how a lot of tag teaming and production juggling they had to do to get this third season done. I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into the first impressions that you guys have of the guest stars and returning guest stars. Of course, we got Admiral Halsey, Victor Garber back. Bruce Boxleitner's back as President Alcazan. Kelly Hu is Admiral Ozawa. And Andy Chapman is Admiral Halland. We got the full table of the admirals here. It's great. And then the Mocklins, of course, Amani Pullman returns as Topa. Rena Owen is Havina. Chad L. Coleman is Clyden. And then we get Ren T. Brown as Captain Retchik. Mark Berry is Commander Colden here. So, guys, I want to get your thoughts on the guest stars and returning guest stars. Kyle?
To me, at this point, I can't even call the admirals returning guest stars. They're just part of the cast at this point. So
exactly, right?
Yeah. I always like to see Admiral Holland, and I really would have liked to have gotten more input from her in this episode, especially after how she was in the episode with the time travel and everything like that. I think I would have liked to have heard a little bit more from her. But come on, the two guest stars that this is all about are Amani Pullman and Rena Owen. Rena Owen is great to see back as Havina and is excellent in this role. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about that more later. And Amani Pullman she has stolen both of the episodes she's been in. She has just walked onto that set and taken over. She has made Topa one of the more intriguing characters, and a character that I really hope is they're able, if we get more Orville, whether it's in movies or in television format, we see become more of an integral part of this cast, because she has been absolutely amazing and having to carry some serious weight on her very young shoulders early on with this character, and she has made this character her own, and she has run with it. It's been fantastic to watch. As I said earlier, Ren T. Brown, Mark Berry, Yvonne Sennett were all great as the Mocklins, and I know we're going to talk about Chad L. Coleman as Clyden a little bit later, but I just can't express again my love for Chad Coleman in the Clyden role. Even though you love to hate Clyden for the most part, this is one of the nicest guys you're ever going to meet, and he's just done such a phenomenal acting job to pull that kind of sentiment out of people, and that's a very hard thing to do. Kevin, one of the ones I always compared to is Jason Isaacs. How much people hated him. He's a nice guy, but how much people hated him, not only as Malfoy's father, but also from The Patriot, and how much he was hated for The Patriot. People were so mad at him for killing Heath Ledger in The Patriot. So to get that kind of performance is so outstanding.
Yeah. Haley, I want to get your thoughts too. I just want to make a comment real quick, though, is we've seen Kelly Hu commanding an Orville starship. I think this is one of those things where, like, if it comes down to another battle, I hope all of these admirals are at the helm of a ship.
Fair enough. No, I think everybody was fantastic in this episode. I think, a lot of that goes to the writing, but a lot of it goes to the actors and knowing who these characters are. And I, Topa is just fantastic. It's incredible what happened to her in this episode and in this season, just in general. And so I really, really appreciated their insight. So I think everybody did a fantastic job.
Agree. Just the casting department, and then being able to, as you said, Kyle, these admirals feel like part of the cast now. They're just not guest stars. And that's what we love about returning characters in Star Trek. They're celebrated as regular cast members. And I think that that's what's happening here as well. And we love that. All right, guys, I want to go ahead and hit the Orville article review section here. Our friends at Den of Geek, Michael Wynn Johnson, has a great article here on Midnight Blue. The New Horizons universe gets a major shakeup that affects not only the Union, but a few key members of the Orville family in an episode of epic proportions. And I pulled a couple of things from this article that I wanted to touch on here, guys. And starts off, when Den of Geek spoke with the creative team of the Orville New Horizons, director John Kazar and executive producers David A. Goodman and Brandon Braga spoke of how many of the episodes in the third season felt like making small films. There is no doubt Midnight Blue is the ultimate example of that creative approach. The third season has thus far surpassed the outreach of the previous two outings of the Orville in terms of scope, scale, and more importantly, social commentary. Only 3 episodes ago in A Tale of Two Topas, the show dealt with an immensely important and topical issue when Topa, Amani Pullman, felt unhappy in their existence. While Topa had the support of one of her fathers, Bortus, they truly only found themselves when they transitioned to female and once again claimed who she is. Along this very personal journey, carried expertly by the young Pullman, Commander Grayson shows Topa a recording of Havina, one of the only outspoken female Moclan voices in the entire universe. This is due to the fact that their own race does not recognize the rights of females and often performs gender reassignment on infants to maintain an all-male culture. The Moclan culture has been an ongoing story thread throughout all 3 seasons of the show, and often an area of contention. When last Havina and the Orville crew met, it was an attempt to have the Planetary Union recognize the sovereignty of the Sanctuary, a colony where female Moclans can live in peace and without fear of persecution or harm. The Union at the time feared losing Moclans as an ally in the fight against the Kaelon, and so simply did not recognize the Sanctuary as its own state. So, guys, I want to talk about your thoughts on the Moclan storylines through the series thus far. And also, I have a second part to this question as well, is why did Seth and his creative team think it is important to show the struggle between the Union / Orville crew and all the male dominated society of the Moclans? And when we have podcasted about the Orville since day one, guys, the Moclans, as they say here, has been a point of contention for obvious reasons. There's obviously a feeling of racism here, inclusion and all this stuff. And there's been a few moments where things got weird as well. And we were feeling like we were being force-fed this Moclan society, and we weren't sure where it was going to go. And at times it was tough to watch. Sometimes it was good to watch. But as we're starting to see in this third season, things are changing. And they're changing for reasons here. So thoughts on the Moclan storyline throughout the series, and why do you think Seth and his team have decided to, as you said, Kyle, really flush out this series or this species? Kyle.
So I think one of the reasons why we're seeing what we're seeing in this third season is this is a product of not being on Fox anymore and being on Hulu, where he has much more creative freedom to write how he writes his stories and can do more. And he's talked about that immensely with the move to Hulu was announced. And ever since then, I think with the Moclan story, it was kind of, the first 2 seasons, there's a serious to it, but they also played it up for some jokey things. Obviously, Latchcomb, that having to pee once every so many years and things like that. But what he's done is what he's done though is he's taken the seriousness that he established with in season 2 with the Sanctuary episode and he's carrying it even farther. And I think it's what they're doing right now, Kevin, is very interesting because I think it's a very much a commentary on a lot of things that are happening in our world today, where we have allies that maybe we need them for certain things, but we don't agree with how they carry their culture. And so it's
like Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, I wasn't going to go there, but yeah. But I mean, it's one of those things to where it's a tough juggling act, and there's rights. There's you in a leadership position. And I'll take it back to the Admiral discussion when Malloy goes off. Malloy goes off because he, other than being court martial, there's no ramifications for him. For the Admirals, they're looking at the bigger picture. And they're like, and Seth and Mercer's looking at the bigger picture here too. And it becomes a time of, and I think it's very reflective on society, even our society today, of what paths are we going to follow? Are we going to follow everything completely morally, or is it going to be like, wait a minute, do we have to respect another culture to a point? But when does that respect stop? And then it just goes, it's too much. And I think that's where we're at with the where we hit with the Moclans was we need the Union needed them for their war against the Kalan and the weapons, but it just what their society represented and how they conducted their society became it wasn't worth dancing with the devil for the benefit anymore, and that's what the Union decided to do. So I'm very curious to see where this is going to happen going forward, but I think it's been an interesting dichotomy in the aspect of you've got where are we to put our morals on another culture, but where are we to say we accept what this culture is doing to continue partnering with them? And it's a fine line sometimes, and it's a line that sometimes you can't judge completely. And the Orville, I think, has handled this very well with the Moclans as it's developed and grown as a series, just like these cultures develop and grow.
Well said. Haley, your thoughts on the Moclans' storylines thus far, and Seth's option to use them to kind of showcase a lot of crap that we're dealing with in the real world.
Yeah. So I agree with quite a bit of what Kyle said, and add to that, I think that it's been a back and forth for me of, okay, do we like the storylines? I like Bortus and the family dynamic, but then overall I was like, okay, interesting culture. But again, it's showcasing, when you create unions, not everybody has the same things. You might have an overarching value and reason for joining into something, but that doesn't mean that you agree on everything, and it doesn't mean that you share the same as everything. And we look at our families and our friends. We don't all have the same stuff. We do to a degree, but then we also disagree on a lot of different things, and that's a natural thing. And so I like that this was a completely different society from maybe seemingly most of the other ones that are in the Union. We don't know, because we've never really gotten much of anybody else outside of the Moclans and then just the Union itself. And so it would be really interesting to kind of see, if they told stories from other races and species that they encountered, of how different they are, right? And we kind of look at, a lot of this is very influenced by Star Trek, and in Star Trek we got few races that we see Starfleet, and then we see the Klingons, and then we see Romulans and Vulcans, and there's the differences, right? And so I think this is kind of his way of having one of those types of societies where it's really fleshed out. We get a lot of it, and they're different, and it can show that conflict, and it creates a natural conflict within the writing for these episodes to say, okay, yes, we like these people, but we have massive disagreements with them, and we don't completely agree with everything they're doing, but we need them. And how often do we, as individuals and as societies collectively say, okay, I don't agree with everything you're doing, but I need you. Um, I'm a Democrat, but I know that in order to get anything done, I've got to agree with Republicans to some degree, right? If I ran for a local office, I'd have to work with the Republicans, even though I disagree with them on most things, and they disagreed with me on most things. We have to collectively come together at some point. And so, that is just reflective of society in general, in any culture.
Well said. Yeah. I think on both of your parts, and Haley, I agree with you, especially when it reflects on what's currently happening now. And even though these episodes were written a couple of years ago, it's still happening. And Kyle, I think you're right too. The Freedom jump to Hulu may have had a huge impact on them being able to really kind of flush out more of these stickier topics that maybe some shows don't want to dive into 100%. And I put a post on Facebook after I saw this episode where I really, as much as I love Star Trek, and they're able to touch on topical discussions that are uncomfortable or whatever, I feel like the Orville really is a little more direct about it. And I think that I know. That's the way I see it. I see that the Orville's just go, you know what, this is the way it is, and we're going to be direct about it in front of your face about it. Kyle, you got a comment?
Well, you mentioned the Hulu thing, and I find it funny, Kevin, because I know we've had this conversation since we founded the Fandom Podcast Network about going behind a paywall. And I think what we're seeing here is that once you're behind that paywall, where people are paying to subscribe instead of it going on a complete free broadcast where you're trying to sell advertisers and things like that, you're really starting to see now where it's let writers' creativity expand out, and they can cover more topics without having to be like, no, the network has to approve this. This has to meet by. And so I really think it's fascinating where we first thought, oh gosh, this paywall thing's horrible. But I think we're getting more creative and better programming out of it because we choose to subscribe to it. It's not something that, it's going to broadcast no matter what. We're choosing to subscribe to it. And because it's a subscription base, there's so much more creative freedom that they have.
It's interesting you say that too, because even though we kind of joke about it, how the TV series The Boys has really been pushing the limits on everything, and that's behind a paywall there on Amazon. But people are like gobbling it up; they love it, And it's like I kind of joke that this is a show. The Boys has been like, there's a line that's drawn, and they're crossing over it each time the line is drawn again. They keep crossing over it. It's like,
so they're redrawing the line. 5 feet down the road or something.
Yeah. But we love it. We love it. And like you said, Kyle, the paywall is allowing shows to take chances. And I think that's good. Okay, guys, another thing I want to touch on again in this article here, by Michael, is in other reviews, we've mentioned how McFarlane has shown his best dramatic work this season, and it's not even close. Mercer has evolved so much in these 3 seasons, and while some of his actions can be compared to classic Star Trek captains such as Picard, this is the instance where the comparison that I think kind of stands out. This might be one of those moments that we look back on Mercer going, this is a great captain moment. And this is where he is talking to Havina privately, saying, I respect your struggle, I really do. But don't advertise tactical opportunism as pious morality, because that's when you lose me. And the article continues, says, this line was expertly delivered by McFarlane, was if both he and the writers channeled classic Picard, and for a character that has at times been entirely immature, their gravitas was undeniable. Both McFarlane and Owen were absolutely powerhouses in this particular exchange, and it elevated the episode immediately. I had to look up pious. Didn't know what that means, guys. For those of you that maybe not know as well, definition is it's an adjective, devotedly religious, making a hypocritical display of virtue, or in parentheses of hope, sincere but unlikely to be fulfilled. I didn't know that. I like to educate myself, so I looked it up. Not afraid to say that. I want to have the Ed Mercer, Seth MacFarlane appreciation discussion again, guys. I want your thoughts on his moments with Havina during this time. Including being the captain, he having to dress down Malloy when Malloy was, maybe going over the edge there, even though he was saying what we were thinking, and his character involvement through season 3, and the change of tone that Seth has been giving him as a character. Haley.
So I pretty much immediately thought that Mercer suspected that there was more than Havina was willing to say, right? And I think that is something that maybe season 1 him probably would not have known. He wouldn't have been like, you're not giving me the whole truth, but I'm not going to call you out in front of other people. I truly appreciate the growth that his character has done. I don't know if it's just strictly due to the writing or if Seth has realized that, it's been some time. I mean, it's weird because we don't really know lapse of time. This is always like, has it been days? Has it been months? Has it been years? Like how long it's been since season 1. So like time wise, and that's part of me. That's just me. I just want to know like how much time has elapsed. So there's been a lot of growth, and I think that's really fantastic. I really truly enjoyed his interactions with Havina in this episode because he was worried too. Topa is a member of his crew, kind of a member of his family, essentially. And Havina had information and he knew it. And so I think that him having the reaction that he did to her is completely understandable. As a captain, as someone who's interacted with her before and has a relationship with her before, I don't think that another captain or an admiral could have came in and been like that with her, because it would have gone over differently for her as a character. And sometimes we need our friends and our close friends, family, to call us out on stuff, and really they're the only ones who can. His dressing down of Malloy, I think it worked, but also like it wasn't necessary because, again, I think he was right. He was totally right in everything. So I've really enjoyed his character growth because he's not as aloof. He's a little more serious, and that's completely understandable given everything that has transpired.
Regarding the timeline, a couple of things. First of all, in trivia, I found out that this episode itself takes place about a year after the events in Sanctuary. Okay. But the series came out in 2017. That's 5 years ago, guys. And of course, we had huge delays. In my head, I'm thinking that it's 5 years later, until I'm told otherwise. So I think that's a big amount of time for a character like Mercer to make these changes. And I think if that's done on purpose, it's a smart decision, because when we look back on season 1, he's insecure in his position. And, he's one of those guys that reminds me of Chandler and Friends, uses humor as a way to deal with difficult situations. Maybe that's kind of the way I thought about it. Chandler and Friends, by the way. Kyle, your thoughts on Ed Mercer, his moments with Havina, his captain ability now, and the involvement of his character.
So first of all, that whole scene with Havina was incredibly well done, and I think it's just best acting performance on the Orville this season. As far as Mercer, Kevin, you kind of hit it on the head. You go back and watch season 1, he's very jokey, he's very insecure. You feel like he's kind of questioning himself a lot. That's why he has Kelly there. Of course, too, we find out later that Kelly kind of had to push for him to get this captaincy, which made him feel a little bit more insecure. But what we've seen is when we...
Oh, I think Kyle froze up there a second there.
So what are your thoughts then?
Okay, we'll wait, hold on, Kyle. You broke up. Yeah, you're back now. Go ahead and kind of restart your thoughts here about you broke up about where Kelly said he was pushing him to become the captain.
Yeah, Kelly kind of had to push him to get his captaincy. In fact, it was one of the things that led to their issues was, Ed was so, but he wasn't necessarily aggressive. Kelly kind of helps him get that captaincy. She wants to keep it a secret. He finds out, but he overcomes his insecurities. And then you look at what Mercer's been through just as captain of the Orville. He's had a crew member who affected a planet becoming a god on this planet, and then watching that planet completely evolve. And I think when you witness something like that, it kind of changes you because you see something evolve. And then you just look at the things he's been through throughout this. He's been through war now. He's been through loss. He's been through everything he has had with the Krill and the relationship there. And now he's also now a father, he finds out. And, all those things add up to the changes into what the Mercer we have now, who is a little bit more serious, takes his job, understands, I think, a little bit more about being a captain. And I think that's one of the thing with Mercer that we've learned is he's still learning how to be a captain. Just because you're named captain doesn't mean you know how to be a captain. They think you're ready to learn how to they think you're ready to be a captain, but you're still learning how to be a captain because it's not just by the textbook, it's by what you go through. And just, I think, like Haley, you brought up the fact, like when he dresses down Malloy, I think that's absolutely the perfect time for that because Malloy said everything everybody wanted to say, but they couldn't say it because of the situation. They were in the middle of a diplomacy meeting. You can't just throw that out there. So yes, he did what he could to dress down Malloy, but in the back of his mind, he's probably thinking, yeah, this is what I wish I could say, but there's a time and place for that. And that's, I think an earlier version of Mercer would have just let him fly like that. Yeah. So, and not stood up. So
that's a great point. Great point. And one of the things that my honest opinion is one of the, things that fans that were critical about season 1 of the Orville and maybe turned fans off and said, I don't want to finish the rest of the show, was how jokey the show got at times. I personally liked it, but it wasn't everyone's taste. And, but I like to think that Seth was listening to that criticism and maybe looking back on this going, okay, look, not only does Mercer need to mature, maybe I do. That's what I kind of like to think, and I like to think that everyone has the opportunity to look back on themselves and going, I need to make a change here. And I think that's okay. And I like when I see that. I like when people not necessarily come out and say it, but you can see it in their art form. You can see it in their work. You can see it in what they do, how they treat people now differently, how they approach things now differently and handle things differently because they mature. And I like to see that. And I see that in athletes as well. I see that in other actors and performers. I see that in musicians and how, I see it in rock stars all the time, the ones that are still alive, and I like them that they mention it, and say, look, I know people looked at me as a god or looked at me in a certain way back then, but I'm glad I made the changes that I did now because, I like who I am now. And so I kind of like to think that that Seth kind of is living vicariously through Ed and showing the maturity of both, not just his character, but himself as well. So I want to ask you, Kyle.
I just wanted to weigh in what you were saying too, because we had that conversation a few episodes back talking about how Seth kind of played the game, was his jokey self until he got the opportunity to write in a way he wanted to write more. He got to that level of, I have the juice to really now tell the stories that I want to tell.
Excellent point. Yes. Yeah, no, that's an excellent point, Colin. You made a really good point about that because they wanted to see his humorous side be translated into this character because that's what we're more familiar with. Excellent point. Yes. And then he got the juice. So there you go. Mm-hmm. Last question about this, guys. Are you buying him as Mercer, as a captain, and I put that in quotation marks, that deserves to be mentioned with the other great sci-fi captains in our series? From what we've seen so far, we've got 2 more episodes. Has he earned that right to be at least mentioned? Haley?
I think so.
Cool.
Yes.
Short and sweet. Like that. Kyle?
He's on the precipice of it. He needs one more really defining. I don't feel like we've had that really truly defining Mercer moment yet. We've had a lot of little moments here and there, but we haven't had that one just like that's the captain
So
moment to me.
do we need like we got with Picard in First Contact? The line must be drawn here. And then he gets called out.
we need something like that where he is forced to. He's in a situation where it's on him, and I really think we could be coming to see that maybe even with his daughter if that plays out, if they play out any more of that in these final 2 episodes.
Yeah.
So I think, but I think that he's right there at that precipice, and we're just waiting for that, like you said, Kevin, that First Contact type moment to really give him that boost where he breaks that glass ceiling.
Yeah. I mean, what's missing is he needs a Q omnipotent character to play against. Maybe we'll see.
Are you volunteering for that, Kevin?
No, I can't even stand anywhere in his shoes. But I answer the question and I say I think he's in the discussion. Definitely an honorable mention for right now. I'm just saying. So I just want to mention that, and we're going to go back to Michael's article here, but he does end off. He gives it a 4 out of 5, saying, while there were certain moments where characters were shoehorned into this episode, this was a massive linchpin for the Orville universe, and it's difficult to argue its importance. This episode features exciting battle sequences, beautiful special effects, powerful performances, well-written political intrigue, and even a guest appearance from the Smoky Mountain songbird herself, Dolly Parton. If this is any indication as to the scope audiences can expect in the final 2 remaining episodes, it may be impossible for any fan not to be excited. 4 out of 5. And of course, we'll be returning to Michael and Johnson a little bit later. But first, we're going to take a little bit break, guys. And we're going to come back and talk about Midnight Blue more with some trivia and, of course, our away mission discussions. We got a lot to get into. We'll be right back. Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. Here are the other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. Culture Clash, where we discuss the latest in entertainment and pop culture. Blooded Kings, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theater, we celebrate our favorite movies. And Time Warp, our fandom flashback show discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie, TV, and pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Hair Metal Podcast, we cover the rock metal music of the 80s and early 90s. Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, discussing the time-traveling Doctor Who universe. Lethal Mullet, an action film podcast covering the 80s, 90s, and beyond. Also, check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, our Star Wars podcast. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast with a deep dive into the final frontier. The Fandom Show, our Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube show discussing the hottest topics in fandom. The True Believers MCU podcast discussing the Marvel Cinematic and Television Universe. Union Federation, our Star Trek and the Orville show. And we're proud to welcome the BQN Network to the Fandom Podcast Network. Please visit our friends on the BQN Network, a Star Trek Universe podcast that also includes your favorite topics, movies, history, superheroes, and more. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on YouTube. The Fandom Podcast Network is also on all major podcast platforms. The Fandom Podcast Network audio master feed is on Podbean at fpnet.podbean.com. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom. All right, welcome back to Union Federation, episode 142. Of course, we are discussing season 3, episode 8 of Orville New Horizons, Midnight Blue. And we continue with our episode trivia and some Easter eggs here. And I found some interesting stuff on the Orville Wiki trivia. They've been doing a lot of production trivia, which I find fascinating. And says a previous of the episode was completed by March 13, 2020. However, due to the global pandemic shutting down the production, this episode was not filmed until May 2021. New restrictions and scheduling conflicts due to COVID-19, as well as 3 pregnant co-stars, made filming season 3's remaining 5 episodes extremely difficult. As a result, the production leaders decided to shoot all of the 5 episodes at the same time an unprecedented and surprising move. Quote by director John Cazar, "It's unbelievably difficult," reported in May 2021. But, quote, "We are doing it. We're holding on to the tone." Despite Cazar or Seth MacFarlane being credited for this episode, the challenges of shooting during a global pandemic meant both MacFarlane and Cazar directed scenes at time and schedules allowed. Quote, "It's almost like we're co-directing at this point," Cazar surmised. Also, too, at approximately an hour and 27 minutes long, including all credits but not commercials, this episode is by far the longest of both the third season and the Orville to date, eclipsing the next longest episode, A Tale of Two Topas, by approximately 11 minutes. And several starring cast characters are seen only briefly. John Lamar, of course, in the beginning there. Isaac has only a single line regarding a scan he's running. Clara Finn appears only once, healing Topa and telling Bortus she will need counseling. Finally, Charlie Burke only appears once on the bridge, questioning Captain Ed Mercer's orders to the entering the nebula and thus violate the treaty. And of course, as I mentioned before, this episode takes place nearly a year following the events of Sanctuary. And as you teased earlier, Haley, the music played at the dinner at the Moclan female colony is an instrumental version of Dolly Parton's Jolene. The leader of the colony, Havina, is a big fan, of course, of Dolly Parton's music. I actually didn't catch that on the first watch, but I did on the second.
I mean, granted, like, I was in band for like 7 years and music is my thing. So I sat there and I was like, oh, okay, this is pretty music. And then I was like, wait, that's Jolene. Nice touch. Yeah.
One of her biggest hits and ones that she's known for, of course.
Oh my gosh, it's so great.
So there was a little confusion and conflicting reports on the scenes with Dolly Parton and Rena Owen, who plays Havina. And there was one post in the IMDb that says that Dolly and Rena filmed their scene together on different sides of the country. Parton filmed her scenes in her cabin in Tennessee, while Owen was filmed on a replica set in California. And as you watch the scene, you can believe that. However, another report came out saying Dolly and Rena filmed their scenes together on the same set, contrary to what was previously posted here, that they were filmed in different parts of the country on duplicate sets. Dolly Parton posted a photo posing with Rena Owen in costume on her Facebook page. And I have some pictures here. And of course, if you search on social media, there's a great picture of Dolly and Rena. Rena's in her costume, of course. And then there's a great picture with John Cazar and Seth standing next to them or on opposite sides of them. And I found an article on Looper saying normally when two actors film a scene together, they're in the same room. But thanks to modern technology, you can shoot their scenes in entirely different places while they're edited together seamlessly. That was the case with the Orville, which appropriately used the latest technology to make it seem like Havina and Dolly Parton were sitting directly across from another. Seth MacFarlane took to Twitter to explain. Quote, "Fun fact, Dolly and her side of the cabin were filmed in Nashville, while Havina's side was filmed in LA. Thanks to director John Cazar, director of photography Jeff Mygett, production designer Stephen Linweaver, and the talents of Dolly Parton and Rena Owen, you'd never know it. It makes sense going back to watch the scene. The two actresses are filmed completely separate from one another and don't physically interact. They merely had to build replica sets so that the transition came across as seamless, and voila, Hollywood magic." Now, goes on to here, the article says, "But while they may not have met during the scene, they did apparently meet in person eventually. One person pointed out how Dolly Parton posted on Instagram a photo of them together along with a question, wait, but Dolly posted this pic, so I'm confused. Did Rena Owen travel to Nashville for Dolly? Fortunately, a response came from director John Cazar. Quote, yes, she did." So guys, thoughts on that scene? And
it was a very interesting
trickery.
Yeah, it was a very interesting scene, and you can definitely, when you like you said, when you watch it, you can kind of pick out when they were together and when they were not. But there was obviously times in that scene that was filmed that were edited in where the two of them were together, because I just think that there was no way around that. They had to be together. But welcome to filming during COVID. I mean, that's, again, the Orville. Not only that, but I mean, I know Jessica Zor was pregnant during the filming of season 3. I didn't realize that 2 other members of the cast were also pregnant as well. So, so they had a lot of challenges to get over, and it makes sense then too why some of the delays on this Orville season coming out were just so long, or even after COVID kind of had seemed to slow down some.
What I find fascinating, Haley, is how clever that this crew, not just talking about the cast on the Orville, but everyone behind the scenes, had to look, if we're going to get this season done, we got to film episode 5, 3, and 7 at the same time. And can you imagine being an actor having to like go, wait, this is from what script again?
Yeah. I mean, I remember we kind of talked about this, or maybe I did talk about this, or I don't remember, but how rather than traditional television shows where you film an episode and then you're done, and then you film the next episode, the Orville would film, okay, we have these actors, so we'll film their scenes. Or, okay, we have access to this location, so we're going to film all the stuff that we're going to film for the entire season at this location. And so it's like a completely different way of doing it. So I can only imagine I would get confused. But again, acting is not my job. And, I thank goodness, because memorizing lines and all that stuff, like, it would just be a hot mess.
Well,
I'd be a hot mess.
No, totally. And like the line earlier that John Kazar said, it's like we're filming a movie, because most of the time movies are shot out of sequence. So yeah, that's something as an actor you have to kind of get used to. It's like, oh, we're shooting the end scene first, and yeah.
Yeah.
So, I remember first learning about that when I was younger, and the famous scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark where Marion is presumably killed in the truck explosion. Apparently that was like shot pretty early, or either at the very end or something, not like, in there. I was like, oh, wait a minute, they don't shoot in order? Whoa, so yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Super weird.
All right, guys, let's get into the meat of the show here. Let's get into our away missions, and let's head into away mission number 1. All right, this is what I like to call the Mocklin character discussion part 1. I want to discuss Havina here, guys. Brilliantly played by Rena Owen. And this is where we continue with the Michael Wynn's Den of Geek article here. Goes on to say, while the visit to the sanctuary is only 1/5 of the episode, and while it may feel longer, is ultimately necessary to set up the main conflict. After Havina asked Topa to become a key member of the Underground Railroad, Topa is kidnapped by the Mocklin delegation and taken to a secret military installation where she is tortured and interrogated. The Mocklins want to know the name of the railroad's accomplice on Mocklin, as they consider him to be a traitor. While Grayson and Bortus attempt to rescue without communication with the Orville, Captain Mercer and his crew investigate the disappearance of all 3 and discover the truth. The third act of this episode is impeccable, and in fact finds a balance and lacked in the first act. Mercer needs Havina's help to admit what is happening so that the Union can conduct an official investigation without instigating the Mocklins. And the exchange between a steadfast Havina and a frustrated Mercer is among the best writing of the series. Havina refuses to admit to Mocklin that she continues in rescue infants and those that seek refuge, which spawns a poetic response from Mercer that while he respects her struggle, she was wrong to try to recruit a child, and that she cannot advertise tactical opportunism as pious morality. And I have the scene between them here in the lines. Mercer goes on, Jesus Christ, Havina, what did you expect her to say? She worships you. She would do anything to please you. Of course she's going to say yes. And then Havina replies, I am as concerned about Topa as you are, Captain, but I do not regret enlisting your help. Our struggle for equality has always demanded risk and, if necessary, sacrifice. Mercer replies, I respect your struggle. I really do. But don't advertise tactical opportunism with pious morality, because that's where you lose me. Haley, guys, I want to get your thought here on the character of Havina. Where she kind of took a turn here, taking advantage of Topa's admiration. What are your thoughts on that, and trying to recruit her successfully into basically becoming a spy? Haley?
I don't think she necessarily used Topa's admiration of her to her advantage. I think she saw an opportunity of having an ally on the Orville, someone who is outside the nebula and could relay messages. And I think that's really what she saw. She saw somebody who would understand based on Topa's own experiences of, I mean, Havina's had a relationship with Topa before Topa even knew. And so I don't think it was, I know you're going to love, you admire me and you love my work, because I didn't take it that way. I saw it as, here is someone who could help us, because we have no other way to get these messages sooner, and she wants to save as many lives as she can. And that's where Havina was coming from. And so I loved that conversation between the two of them, and Havina giving Topa the necklace and talking to her about how, things can be rough, but they can be polished over time, and things can change over time. People can change over time. If this stone can change over time, other people can too. And I think that lended into the story at the end with Clyden coming back and recognizing that he could change, even though it was going to be hard. And so I really think Havina was looking at, I have an ally. And that really speaks to a lot of things, because a lot of people currently in this country and in other countries need allies. They need people they're not taking advantage of the fact that they have a position of power, that they could do something and make something of a change. It is, you are an ally and I need your help and I need your support. And I can't maybe necessarily do something for myself. I can to a degree, but I can't continue it further. And I need someone else to step in who has the means and ability to help me further whatever it is that I'm trying to do.
Good point. Kyle, your thoughts?
So with Havina, while her intent was for what she thought was the best, how it comes about and what happens is, this is when somebody who has a very strong belief in what they're doing and what their belief is right, they don't necessarily think about all the consequences to the person they're pulling into the situation. Havina, in her mind, absolutely 100% right. What she's doing is the right thing, period. But to take Topa, who is still a child and who is still in the midst of her own discovery, she's still trying to figure herself out here. She has so many questions about herself. And then to ask her something like this, putting her at risk, asking her to keep secrets not only from her family, but secrets that put her at risk. And she is only a child, and she is still a bit of a confused child. And I don't think Havina had malicious intent in asking Topa to do this. I think subconsciously she knew, this child worships me. She's not going to tell me no. And she even puts it in, if you don't feel comfortable, before she even starts the conversation, she does say, if you don't feel comfortable with it, we'll end this conversation right now. I think in this case, with Havina, it was somebody who has all the best intentions, believes they're doing the right thing, and believes in it so strongly that you can't see the forest from the trees sometimes. And she didn't stop to think, this is a child. This is a child who's been through a lot. This is a big ask, and not maybe fully realizing all the risks that she was putting Havina in, because all she could think about at the time was her agenda and what she was trying to accomplish. What the risk that Havina was putting Topa in. So again, it's for the right reason, but it might not be the proper execution here. And this is the thing with any kind of movement like this, or any type of rebellion. There's a dark side to it, and there's consequences to it, and it's not even, there's a lot of shades of gray, and this definitely all falls within that shades of gray, or as we'll say here, the midnight blue.
No, you're right. I had an issue with the way she went about it, I think is what you're saying too, Kyle. because of little things that she said and did. The line like, our struggle for equality has always demanded risk and, if necessary, sacrifice, which came to me like, if Topa needs to die for me, so be it, as long as, sacrifice goes unknowing. And she's gotten to a point, Havina, it's gotten to a point to where, she has to figure out how, this cause that she has started and has become a hero and idolized for great reasons. There's that time where we see our heroes start to kind of not necessarily be villainous, but step into that gray area to where, a lot of heroes in reality in our history have had to do, and some of that gets swept under the rug because of the end result, and I just would have liked to have seen a little more from Havina's character. Yeah, she says, we don't have to talk about this and we drop this now, but I think she should have come back to that after she was asking Topa to do, like, you realize what this could mean for you and how dangerous this is. This means lying to everybody and you could die and blah, blah, blah. I felt that there's a little more sincerity there than like, this is the mission, soldier, do it. I would have felt that way as well. Because when that line that Mercer says, when you advertise tactical opportunism as pious morality, because that's when you lose me. And I was with Mercer there because that's where I was losing, her reason for doing so and not realizing the influence. Because let me explain one other thing here. The reason why I was feeling that way, because I've seen in person and in enough storytelling, whether it's movies, books, whatever it is, television, and in person, of someone who idolizes someone for what they've done and who they are, and that person meeting that person and taking advantage of them because of that in not a good way. That's what I saw from Havina at that moment. Kyle.
I know I'm paraphrasing this. I'm not getting the quote exactly right. In the conversation and listening to you talk, Kevin, and just something I think about, I go back to the Dark Knight when Batman is telling Harvey Dent and Commissioner Gordon, sometimes the hero has to become the villain for the right thing to be done. And this kind of felt like Havina was kind of starting down that path. It's like she was thinking she's doing the right thing, but there's some villainy behind it, whether she realizes it or not. And I think she did realize it, obviously, right. Because she knew that. But again, that it's all about when, and I think that's one of the great things with this episode. It's about lines. It's about when is it okay to cross the line, and how far across the line do you go? And it goes with Havina, with her motivations to save young female Moclans and what needs to be done there. And it goes with the Union. How much of the Moclan bullshit do we take before we realize that the price is too high for what we're getting from it?
Oh, we'll get to that.
Yeah, so I'm just saying those are lines that I saw coming in there. So
I want to ask you guys, quick question. You're Bortus. Bortus may not forgive her. Would you, Haley, if you're in Bortus' situation?
No.
Kyle?
After seeing what happened to my daughter, not a chance in hell. I might still respect what you're trying to do, but I will never trust you, and you will stay away from my daughter.
I agree with both of you. I would feel the same way. All right, guys, lighten things up just a little bit here in away mission number 1, Dolly Parton. Dolly Parton's influence on Havina. A great scene at the end of that scene together with Dolly and Havina. She starts playing the song Try. And then it transitions to the Orville crew getting ready to move out of that beautiful shot of the moving into position to get to the quantum drive. And you see the Orville go through that pink cloud and that song reaching its crescendo. I'm getting goosebumps right now, just even remembering that scene and talking about it. Thoughts on the influence of Dolly on not only Havina, but us as fans of the Orville? Haley.
Yeah, I really loved that. I thought that was so well done and kind of a good transition into what had happened so far in the episode and what comes after. And this notion of you don't know what you're capable of until you try, you don't know what can change until you try is really quite powerful.
Yeah, well said. Kyle.
I think the big thing from that is again the impact it had on Havina and realizing, kind of snapping her out of her one dimensional thinking that there was only one way to do this, and that you got to sometimes you have to do it in a different way to get the results you want, and you might even get better results. Might not be the easiest way, but you got to try. And I think that even applies to, like I said, with what the crew was doing, with what the decisions Mercer made later in the episode, and how things went. If you don't try to look at it from a bigger perspective and look at and just only look through it for tunnel vision, you're short-sighting yourself. You're short-sighting your own goals because you're so locked in on tunnel vision. And I think that's what Dolly really got through to Havina with the song and with just the conversation, is that you got to see the bigger picture around you, right? And you got to understand everything that's going on. Talking about her toes getting cut and everything like that. There was a bigger picture to it than just her toes getting cut. So,
I've never been to Dolly World, but I've been to the area in Pigeon Forge and all that area in Tennessee, and it's amazing the influence that Dolly has had, not just on music but on pop culture. And I remember seeing Dolly on Hee Haw way back in the day, and of course I remember 9 to 5 and a couple of movies that she's been in as well. She's just been an icon, and she's beloved by so many people. I love the fact that we not only did we get that classic 9 to 5 song in last season's episode, but Seth says, you know what? Let's step up the Dolly factor here a little bit. Let's get her on the show and let's have her a direct impact on Havina. And Havina referring to her songs as poetry, it brings a smile to my heart with that, and absolutely love that. All right, guys, we got one more away mission here. Let's go ahead and head down to it. Our Mocklin character discussion, part 1. Let's go ahead and touch on Amani Pullum as Topa, Peter Macon as, of course, Lieutenant Commander Bortus, and Chad L. Coleman returns as Kalyden. And I got another quick little thing here from Michael's Den of Geek article here saying, yet once again, this episode belongs to our resident Mocklins. The young Amani Pullum is just 2 short episodes, has proven herself well beyond her years. And this episode is once again a tremendous journey for both the character and the actor. Macon, much like the previous Topa centric episodes, gives the typical reserved Bortus such believable highs and lows and runs the gamut of emotions, which is always a pleasure to watch. I want to get you guys' thoughts on the moments that we had with Bortus and Topa, especially the rescue scene and Bortus's fatherly revenge. Haley.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I love the development that Bortus has taken. And it's really quite interesting to see. You kind of figure that he might be a little bit more progressive than most Mocklins when we first encounter him, because he's working, he's part of the union, he's in a union uniform and working on the ship. And so you kind of maybe think that maybe he's not so close-minded to different viewpoints. But then in some ways he still is. And so to go from season 1 Bortus to this episode and him recognizing and saying, my daughter, and I love her, and the fear that immediately takes over him, and he doesn't show it very well, which is very Vulcan, but the fear that he has in when they can't find Topa and Topa is missing. And that was really just subtle, but also very, very powerful. And his revenge, I expected him to go off and attack the let's see, the characters, and I think he was like the interrogator or something like that is what he was labeled.
That scene reminded me of Kill Bill Volume 2 when the bride takes out Daryl Hannah's one good eye.
Yeah. I expected it simply just because I would expect something similar of myself if something had happened to my daughter. And so I expected it, but it was still just like very intense and again completely understandable. And I loved that later, he's very concerned for Topa and wants the best for Topa because, you can look at it as if Clyden had still been in the picture, would Clyden have cared? What would Clyden's reaction have been to this whole situation and the circumstances? And it would have been markedly different. And granted, yes, we get Clyden coming back at the end of this, and it's beautiful and really powerful and well done, I think, in so many ways for that character's growth and development. But if we take currently this, going down to the sanctuary planet and all that, Clyden would have been so markedly different. And would Clyden have cared? And sad to say, I don't think so. And I know that that's part of how this character had been written so far, but it's really interesting to see those dichotomies of how that changed. And I probably got more teary-eyed and more emotional when Clyden came back.
We'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
We'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
Yeah, hold on. Kyle, the moments between Boris and Topa and that little revenge scene there.
I think it makes perfect sense for Boris to react that way. I think any father would, for the most part, react that way in the aspect of, especially his daughter's been kidnapped. He comes in and finds her in that condition, sees the man right there who put her in that condition.
Yeah.
And you're talking about the Moclan mindset, Moclan culture too. It's an aggressive culture. So that didn't surprise me. It also, let's be honest, it was a convenient way out of a little loophole they had put themselves in because that interrogator knew the information. He had gotten the information out of Topa, and he's killed before he's able to tell anybody else. So it put a little knot to the end of that as well.
Hold on. He wasn't killed.
Yeah, I don't think
he wasn't killed, but his brain was fried because if you remember, they made the comment about people exposed to that at a certain setting.
Yeah, we don't know if he's been killed because that's what Kelly was trying to avoid from happening. Yeah. At least that's the way I interpreted it.
So it's like he's not going to be telling anybody anything anytime soon. Let's put it that way. I want to ask you, and I think it's appropriate to ask you here. There was a part of me through this episode that when you see that base and they arrive at it, I was half expecting Clyden to show up at that base, like he was maybe have pulled some strings to get Topa kidnapped with the government or something like that.
I had wondered if Clyden was going to make an appearance then, or if he was going to be helpful or what. I had kind of considered it. Were you thinking you might see Clyden during that scene, Haley?
I thought about that, and then I also, and granted, I don't think Topa would have done this because Topa loved Clyden, even though everything that had transpired. Part of my brain was like, did she tell the interrogator it's Clyden that is the one that's helping? To kind of, because of anger. And I also wonder, like, did she tell the interrogator what he wanted to know, or did she make something up?
Right. Yeah. Curious. Okay, guys, I want to kind of touch on a couple of these moments here separately. In an emotional moment with injured Topa, Bortus called out the Moclan representatives at the Union delegation meeting and its representatives. And I don't know if you noticed, but we had Peter Macon as Bortus shedding a tear during this time. And it was a strong scene to show that Topa was still injured. She refused medical treatment here. Very, very interesting scene that I wasn't sure if we were going to get, but I was happy that we did. Kyle?
When that scene happened, I kept waiting for what did happen with the door come, and I almost thought we weren't going to get it because they were kind of like to the end of the conversation. It felt like it was. There's a few things with the scene though. One, obviously the Borders moment, we see him crying and how proud he is of his daughter, but also let's think about the fact that as a father, he's wanting his child to get right to medical attention, and he respected her wishes well enough to present her as she was. So he had enough respect for Topa and what Topa believed to allow for that. And that probably was an incredibly hard decision for him as a father not to get his child medical attention right away. And so that makes that even that much more powerful. And then obviously that, it's one of those things too where the visual image on its own carries all the weight. You can have the word, you add the words to it, but that when you give people that visual image and they actually see the reality, put that reality in front of them, that's when you're going to get people. You can say words all you want when you have that visual image to back it up, and it showed in this episode.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that visual image up, Kyle. And Haley, I wanted to ask you, when that scene was starting to develop and you saw Topa in front of Bordis, you almost think that she's going to say something, you guys did this to me, blah, blah, blah. But no, you see Bordis put his hands on her, and then he steps forward and then gives that speech.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I don't think that she had to necessarily.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that because with the writer saying, no, Topa doesn't have to say anything. Because like Kyle said, it is a statement in itself that they walk in with her and she has not gotten the help yet, and shows them and shows the union and shows the delegation that this is what they're doing. Because we can talk and we can say things are happening as much as we want, but sometimes that isn't enough for some people to say, oh, it really is happening. Unless it is literally in front of their face, they'll acknowledge that something is wrong and something is taking place that shouldn't be. But until sometimes it affects a person themselves to some degree, or someone that they love to some degree, or it is literally standing right in front of them, they will refuse to acknowledge it simply because they don't want to have to deal with it. And I think that's what this is the union has not wanted to actually deal with the way that Mocklin culture disagrees with so much of what the union stands for, that they just don't want to deal with it. So they just ignore it. Yep. It's there, but they're ignoring it until you can't anymore.
Yeah. And that's why
that's what it is. We ignore things until we can't, because it's confrontation and it's conflict, and we don't like that. It makes us uncomfortable. But unfortunately, that's not always what's okay. You have to have that confrontation and conflict.
Which is why we love the way Malloy called him out and pretty much worded it the way that we've been thinking of this whole time. Okay, guys. Clyden returns. I want to set this up a little bit here. So Topa is getting medical treatment from Finn. And there's that wonderful moment where Finn says to Bordis, she's healed up. She's going to have emotional scars, And you see how it's internally torturing Bordis as well. And then Kiali comes in saying, we have a visitor. And I'm reliving that moment, watching it for the first time, going, no, it's not Clyde. No way. And as soon as he walked in, I lost it because I knew what was coming. As a father, knowing when your child is hurt, no matter what you've done before, when it takes a moment like this to make you realize that maybe I didn't handle things as well, and being a parent, you know when you've messed up. and learning from it and being honest with your child about it too is important. But seeing seeing Clyden come in there and seeing the look on his face and then the camera going to Boris's face was just emotional gut punch for me. And I started tearing up big time during the scene. And the moment that he has Clyden with Topa and saying, "No, you rest," and him mentioning how he regretted what he said, and it took for him to make a moment like this to make him realize what he had been saying and how he had been acting was wrong. I'm horribly paraphrasing what he's saying, but it was such a beautiful scene. And I know you guys are feeling the same thing while I'm trying to horribly describe this, but I want to ask you guys, do you forgive his character after Chad's performance? Kyle.
This is complicated because I'm not a parent like you, Kevin, or you, Haley, but we have all had family members in our lives or somebody close to us that we've had falling outs with, things for whatever reasons, whether they're silly things that should never gotten that for or something serious. There's a couple of things here for me. First of all, if we're going to play this out in a little bit more of a real life situation, Clyden shows up. Borders has every right to say, "No, you're not coming in here," and he doesn't. But he has every right to, and he has every right to let his own anger and frustrations Clyden out. But Boris realizes maybe that's not the moment, and he lets Clyden go see Topa. The other aspect of this is here when you've had a falling out with somebody that you care about, whether it's your own child, a family member, or whatever, and you spend so much time feeling so much anger, and that anger is just eating at you, and it becomes a part of you. And then something happens, and a lot of times it takes something like the threat of losing this person from your life completely. You can be angry at that person all you want to be, but there's this sense of, in the back of our minds, this person's still alive, they're okay, so I can be angry. But then there's so many times in life where we have that feeling, and instead of looking for forgiveness or trying to resolve the situation, we just hold on to it. We hold on to it. We hold on to it. We don't act on it until it's too late. And in this case, it was lucky enough that Topa's injuries were recoverable from, and Clyden realized the emotional because of Clyden being a parent and realizing he couldn't be without this person, and realizing, having that moment happen, and Clyden realizing, wait a minute, I need to re-see my priorities here, and going there, being there for Topa, talking with Topa. It's incredibly emotional. It's incredibly powerful, and it speaks a lot to Clyden's character. And I think that forgiveness is, in this case, is something that takes time. It isn't just one moment, because it's easy also, and I this might be me being cynical, but I also believe that forgiveness is something that takes, in this kind of situation, does take time. It's not, you get lost in the emotion of the moment, but then it's the afterwards of that too. And for Clyden, we see that, and I know we're going to talk about the dinner scene here in a few minutes. But there's still this feeling with Clyden, even as we continue on. It's like, yes, he's changing and he's evolving, but there's still things there, and he's trying. And I think what you do is you may not say you're 100% forgiven, Clyden, but I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt. I'm giving you that your love for your child is more than this hatred you've shown.
Kyle, hold on a sec. Are you speaking as if you're there with them in reality, or are you speaking as a fan or not fan of the character? Because we were obviously horrified by the way things were left between what he said to Topa before he left the family in the Orville. I'm asking, as a fan, are you forgiving the character?
I'm on the path as a fan. It's both, because I would treat I would treat the character like I would treat a person. It's like, okay, you've written this way. I'm not sure I'm ready to forgive you 100% for the things you said, but you know what? You're on a path now with as this character. Let's see where we're going with it, because I think there's some things
it takes a while. You need to redeem yourself a little bit more, is what you're saying.
Yeah, coming in an emotional moment takes a little more. It takes a little more than just that one emotional moment. But you made a great start here. So,
Haley, do you forgive his character after Chad's performance?
Not yet. No. I think it's because there's that trauma history. Clyden has his own trauma history that he has to work on, and so he's got his trauma that's coming in, and then he has his trauma with Topa, and he also has his trauma with Bortus. And so there's a lot that has to be worked on in order to get to a place where full forgiveness can actually happen. Not just for the characters, but also I think in seeing this, like, I can see that Clyden has opened his eyes a little bit more to the situation and how his trauma and his relationships have impacted things. And so, like, I loved it when Topa was like, Topa wanted to apologize, because we do that. We apologize when we're not the ones who need to apologize. It's not something that we've done. And Clyden says, no, you're not. You have nothing to be sorry for. I was in the wrong. And that's a huge step in working towards being able to fix mistakes. You can't undo them. They're there, but you can correctively choose a different path when you recognize, no, this person didn't do anything wrong. That was me. And so I think it's the start of a journey. And again, it kind of depends, and we'll see where things go. But it's definitely something where Clyden was written a certain way for us to not like him for so long.
Yeah.
And so you can't immediately with one episode say, I like this character now. I like this moment the character has had. But that doesn't mean that I like the character.
I think you're right. There's a balance there you have to keep in mind. And I was approaching it as the way it was written, because, I know the show was longer, but they had to, have Chad's performance kind of come in and say what we hope that he would eventually say in a certain amount of time, because he's played this very polarizing character for so long. He's said so many things that we can't stand and maybe even hate, especially the way he last ended with Topa there. But my dad was watching this reality show about courtroom reactions, basically, and I forget the name of the show, but there was a scene where, not a scene, but an actual video of a guy that was caught after a club shooting, and he killed a girl, and he got to be there to face comments and reactions by the girl's family. And the father, as you can imagine, being a parent, went off on this guy, basically saying words like, I hope you burn in hell, and all this kind of stuff. And then that made me think about how other parents have forgiven people that have killed their children or family members, and so this internal conflict was going inside me a little bit. So when I watch this scene, because I feel like there needs to be more forgiveness, I forgave him. And I hope that the writers don't use this gut punch again to turn the table again and make him unlikable. I hope this is the turning point for his character, to where you want to believe in reality when you forgive someone and you tell them that you forgive them, that they take that moment and seize it and going, okay, I need to better myself, and I'm this person now. Why? And so I was, I forgave him. And I'm hoping, especially this goes into the next scene, the dinner scene with Bortus, Topa, Clyden, and Kelly. And of course, there was some really tough scenes to watch between Clyde and Kelly earlier on. And but it was Clyden that kind of put the olive branch out there to Kelly, and realizing what Kelly has done for Topa and the life-threatening moments that she put herself in, along with Bortus and her making the comment too that they make a good team. But that was another moment for Clyden to go, look, I'm making my amends here, and I'm doing it to the people that deserve it. Kyle?
When you talk about that scene and when Clyden puts out the olive branch, and this goes to Chad Coleman's acting performance here. So it felt like, yes, he knew he was putting out the olive branch, but you weren't quite sure he was going to at first, you know? And I think that's kind of normal, because there's more depth in the situation between Commander Grayson and Clyde in there. And I think it was kind of okay, I'm trying here. I'm trying to make this step. But you could feel like he was still hesitant himself. And I think that's a very natural reaction. It's like a person can't completely change who they are overnight. It's hard. You might start off the first few days with the best effort and the best intentions, but you're going to fall into habits of how you were raised or how you were brought up in your beliefs. And it's a matter of catching yourself. And I think that's where we're kind of at with Clyden is, do I trust you? Do I think he's on the right path? Yes. Do I trust he can completely stay on that path the whole time? No, I think that's unrealistic to think about that. I think one of the biggest things here that a lot of people aren't talking about was when Bortus and Clyden both say, we've given up our status as Moclan citizens.
Mm-hmm.
That I think that's been so underrated in the conversations about this, because that's a very big deal. They're giving up everything.
No, you're right. And that him saying that the Orville's his family now. And the other thing too is in that scene with Topa still in the hospital bed, after Clyden says that all that stuff to Topa, the camera goes to Bortus, and he kind of closes his eyes and just kind of soaks in what just happened, and then he like exhales a little bit. That scene said a lot. Haley, your thoughts on that end scene?
Yeah. Well, first, to touch on that, I was going to mention that I think that was probably, again, one of the more powerful, not overly emotional scenes, but you see Bortus, this weight that he's carried of, what had transpired with Clyden, between him and Clyden, and then Topa and Clyden, and he kind of is able to let a little of that go. And I think that, that's a huge step for him and his relationship with Clyden, because we don't even necessarily get that Bortus has forgiven Clyden yet. We don't know. Yes, they're eating together and they're a family again, but in that dinner scene, I sense that, yes, they've given up their Makla status, which is powerful for them, because they are essentially gone from their culture and their society. They're cutting off ties and connections to that aspect, and taking on this new adventure together, the three of them. But there was still something in the air of, there's still, like I said, there's a lot of work to be done. And I don't necessarily know how much both Bortus and Topa have necessarily fully forgiven Clyden. I mean, there's levels of that. There's that level of, I can forgive you to this degree, but we've got to work on stuff for me to, kind of fully get that relationship back. I liked Clyden extending and saying, hey, would you like to join us for dinner? His tone, though, if you listen to the tone that Clyden has with Kelly, it's still a little angry of how he would talk to people. Like when he's talking to Topa and he's apologizing to Topa, and he's talking to Topa and Bortus while they're eating dinner before Kelly comes in, it's softer. And then when Kelly steps in, you can hear just a little bit of that harshness and stubbornness and kind of some negative traits come in the tone of Clyden's voice.
Mm-hmm.
So if you didn't pick up on it, I would
No,
challenge
you're
you to
right.
listen to that.
And Kyle's
And
nodding his head too. He picked up on that as well. Yeah.
so, there's still that I'm going to invite you to dinner, but I don't know. Like, I feel like Clyden doesn't necessarily know where to trust Kelly, but then Kelly isn't quite sure where she stands with Clyden either. And so I think, yes, extended the olive branch, but there's some stuff that's got to happen there for them to get to a space where Clyden can have that softer tone when he's talking to Kelly. And so that was kind of interesting, like that there was still some tension in that room.
Good point, Kyle.
Also, if you go back and watch that scene, there's a point where Kelly kind of just shares a look with Bortus real quick when she first kind of walks in, and I don't know if is it because of the moment
I know what you're talking about. It's like it's awkward now a little,
Yeah, there's awkward because of the moment they had earlier,
Yeah.
plus just the history with Clyden. So is this something again? I think this goes back to the writing, and this is a human reaction. This is what we know. How this is an emotional. It's not just all fixed. Not everything's Disney hunky dory and stuff like that. There's underlying layers here, and I'll be curious to see if in our final 2 episodes we get a little bit more exploration of the underlying layers here, because this is what makes this work so well. And again, I go back to both Peter Macon and Chad Coleman and Amani Pullum. They were all phenomenal in this, but both Peter Macon and especially Chad L. Coleman, when I said, when you separate the actor from the character, Chad L. Coleman is phenomenal.
Yeah.
The emotions they've put in and just these little layers and just enough to have you talking about and seeing these little things is amazing acting. And it's also a great on the writers.
Yeah, absolutely. You nailed it there, Kyle. And I know this episode's going a little long, but this episode of the Orville has given us so much to dissect and has created wonderful discussions. And I have to ask you guys one last question here, one last topic I want to touch on here. Just a little, again, special thanks here to Michael Lynn Johnson from Den of Geek. He goes on to say, the union is doing what they have, with the union doing with what they should have done long ago and expelling Mocklus from its ranks. They have now lost 2 powerful allies in the battle against the Kalon. Krill, of course, being the other. Families were changed, relationships were destroyed, wrongs were rectified, and yet the larger battle still lies ahead. So, guys, the Union and the Mocklins. Are you satisfied with Mocklus being expelled from the Union? And how do you think that this will be played out in the last 2 episodes? It's really tough to think about how they're going to do this in 2 episodes because we want to see so much happen. And I just want to start off by saying I think that when it comes down to it, the Mocklins, I know there's been this thing where the Union is afraid to sever that tie because they need their weapons. They need the Mocklin muscle in the struggle against the Kalons. But I think the Mocklins are going to need the Union's help. And I think that there are Mocklins that actually are afraid to speak and think that maybe the way women have been treated is not the way to go. And I'm thinking that maybe something will change there. That's me being the half glass full guy. I would love to see that because we've seen that change starting in, Clyden. Let's hope someone else in the Mocklin society does as well. And how that's going to tie in with the Krill, I don't know. I'm looking forward to seeing if that's something that happens here. But I think it needed to be done in this story for the Union to let a powerful ally go because of cultural differences. And I think that this was done not just for us as fans, but also sends a message to anyone that might be able to relate this to their personal lives, saying it's okay to let toxic relationships go and move on and seeing what you can do to help with the situation or move on with your life. You guys know what I'm trying to say here. I don't know if they're trying to say that. That's a message that I got. Haley.
Well, and I mentioned that earlier. I said in saying this, and so I think that it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing for the union to do because, yes, sometimes cutting off a connection and is difficult, but the growth that can come from that can be really truly wonderful. And I agree. I think that there could potentially be something that comes up where Moklas realizes that they were wrong. Obviously, there's already people on Moklas who think that their all-male society is wrong because, they work to get girls out and off the planet and to the sanctuary. So I think there is that under boil of what is going on in their culture that they've been subduing and ignoring and saying it doesn't exist and we're better without it. And they need to do their own recognizing of, hey, we have two things here. And are we better for ignoring it, or are we better if we accept it and embrace it? And who knows what'll happen? I mean, it's hard. It's hard when there's only 2 episodes left to see what transpires, and who knows, maybe we'll get another season. Hopefully we do, or another couple of seasons at least, to kind of wrap up a story. I think with way television's going, 5 seasons sometimes can be perfect. You don't need anything longer because then it can drag things out too long. But so we'll see what happens. And I agree with what you're saying, Kevin, in that, it's okay to let toxic people go because we don't know what we're capable of if people are holding us back.
Yep. Well said. Kyle.
I think one of the most interesting things to me with this too is I question if Topa doesn't come in that room and they don't have that visual, does the union make the same decision? Did the union had to basically have the situation put right in their face? And it got to that point where it's like, okay, this is just we have to do something. They were forced to act. And I think that's kind of something that is kind of the message here is maybe don't always wait till you're absolutely forced to act. Try to be more conscious of certain things. In this case, again, like I talked about before, where's the line to go from this is an ally we're benefiting from to we're selling our own soul?
Yeah.
And I think that was something that the union and that aspect of it, the union had to face. It was like, no, these people are hurting children now. They're interrogating children, and they're basically terrorizing a whole group of people within their own society. And I think one of the great things that the Orville has done is if you look at each of what I consider like the 3 quote unquote villain races with the Kalon, the Mocklins now, and the Krill, they've all got something within their own society that is questionable. You have the Krill with how they handle certain things within and their own political system. You've got the Kalons now where we have a possibility of them being reprogrammed, but we also learned that they're not inherently evil. They were driven to a point. So there's great subplots for each of these 3 races. I'm curious to see can they wrap up all these subplots in two more shows, even if they're both 2-hour shows. So a lot of interesting things to see what's going to happen. I think the last 2 episodes of the Orville are going to surprise us in many ways, and we're going to see a lot of interesting things over the next couple to 4 hours of television.
All right, guys, let's go ahead and wrap this up here and let's transport back. Unless you guys had any other comments or reactions to this episode, feel free to speak up now.
I think
we've covered quite a bit. All right, guys. Thank you again for joining us here. This is Union Federation number 142. We've been discussing the episode of Orville New Horizons, season 3, episode 8, Midnight Blue. Go ahead and look for Fandom Podcast Network, of course, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course our YouTube channel. We can also join our Union Federation Podcast Facebook group page. And if you'd like to email us, you can hit us up at unionfederation@gmail.com. My name is Kevin. I am on Twitter and Instagram at Spartan_Phoenix. Kyle, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at AKyleW or on Instagram at AKyleFandom.
Haley, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Trekkie01D.
Awesome. You can also find Amy on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson. And also the BQN is also on Twitter and Instagram at BQN Podcast. And their Facebook group is the BQN Collective, their listener group. All right, we're going to look into that Orb of Prophecy. As we mentioned, we got Star Trek Lower Decks coming soon, Prodigy later this year. And next week, we have the Orville New Horizons continues with episode 9 called Domino. That airs July 28th. And the following week, is it the season or series finale? Episode 10 is now tentatively titled Future Unknown.
Very, very, very prominent, very timely title there.
I know. Haley, thank you so much as always. I always love your insight on these episodes. You've done so well, and thank you.
Thank you.
Kyle, as always, brother, love talking Orville with you. Well done.
Yep, only 2 episodes left for this season. Hopefully it's not a finale.
I know. All right, guys, we're going to head on out of here. Goodbye. Now, hailing frequencies are now closed.